Hello and welcome to this week's video on wild camping. So what this video is all about this week is I'm going to go through a run through of my recent camping trip in North Wales when I went wild camping in the Carnarvon mountain range. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all the gear and equipment I took with me, all budget stuff really, and I'm going to review it a little bit and I'm going to tell you what you need to take on your next wild camping trip. First thing I will say is obviously wild camping needs to be light. You're often walking into the mountains, going up some serious elevation, and you need to make sure you're not carrying too much because otherwise you're going to suffer. It's pretty much what I did on my first trip. I think everyone pretty much does it, but you do reevaluate and think what you might not need next time you go and what alternatives you could take instead of a big heavy 2-litre bottle of water. Kind of go on a route that includes water where I can take from the streams or the lakes around where I'm camping. Let's get started then. So let's review the equipment that I used on my recent camping trip, and let's talk about what it is you need to take when you do go on your first wild camp. Starting off then with a tent. So I took a Vango Scarful 200. It's a brilliant tent, very much a budget tent, but it is used quite a lot by the DV and all those kind of things. Quite a popular one. It's really easy to pitch. I've just pitched it up myself in 5 minutes in the back garden. It's really simple and it's quite easy to figure out, and it's quite cheap as well. I think I paid around about £60 for it, so it's not expensive at all. And I took it out last week on a adventure in North Wales, and it withstood some pretty heavy winds without even a sort of flutter. So it's a very good tent and I would recommend this. So if we come inside the tent, we can show you around. Okay, so this is the inside of the tent. You can see it's a 2-man tent, so you can see there's enough space for 2 sleeping pads, and obviously if you're not using it as a 2-man, using it as a 1-man, it then becomes just a vast amount of space to store things and to have things in the tent. So there's my sleeping mat there with my sleeping bag out, and that's taking up one side of the tent, and on the other side I basically stored my backpack in here overnight, and obviously a bunch of other stuff just laid out. It was quite good because I could just lay it out on the floor just over there, like my power bank, my phone and anything I was charging, and it made it quite a bit easier to find. There's a big vent on the back to help with condensation. I didn't have any condensation in the tent at all last time I used it, but I have used it on campsites before, and it does have some condensation in it in the mornings if it is a particularly warm night and you've breathed a lot. There's plenty of pockets on the sides here, so they're really good pockets as well. They hold in pretty much anything you want. And there's another one on this side, which basically is the same. And then what I like is the attention to detail. So on the inner door, the bedroom door, there's like a storage pocket there. So instead of having this flapping around, you can just put it into that little storage pocket and it just makes things neat and tidy. And yeah, very good. The zips on the tent are absolutely brilliant. So they zip up nice and easy, and unfortunately the inner one isn't double zip, but the outer one is, so if you wanted to have a PP, it's not too bad. So that's the tent. I'll probably at some point do a more in-depth review of the tent on its own video, just to go through all the bits and bobs of what the tent includes and how to set it up and stuff like that. But it's a brilliant tent and I highly recommend it. It's not expensive at all, and yeah, it's just a cracking little thing that I bought, and I have no intention of buying another one because I think it's absolutely fantastic. I don't need another one. Sleeping situation then. So what do they use for sleeping? Okay, so it's all very much budget gear. So I've got underneath the mat, I've got a foil lined foam mat underneath there. That was £6 from Tesco. It did nothing. I was cold overnight, so it didn't stop the cold coming from the ground, and neither did this. So this is an Best Way self-inflating mat. Now it's only cheap. I paid 25 quid for it, but you can now get them for £6 or £7 because they're on sale. Very comfortable actually. I've used it in the caravan while I was away, and I've also used it in just general camping. It is really comfortable. I mean, I get a really good night's sleep on it, but it's got a really low R rating, so it doesn't stop any cold coming through, and neither did this foil mat, surprisingly. I couldn't believe it, unless it was just a sleeping bag, because the sleeping bag's also budget, but very comfortable. So if you're on for a summer night and you don't got to worry about cold, really recommend. And it folds up quite small, you can see here, that's how small it folds up, and it doesn't really take much space in your bag. I've also got this winter sleeping bag, so this is an Active Era 4 seasons sleeping bag, so they say. It is a mummy sleeping bag, and it does have a hood, which is good because I was cold at 3:30 in the morning, so I just got inside the sleeping bag and put the hood up. So it is a good sleeping bag. It's warm enough, but I'm not sure if it's warm enough for winter. And then I've got a Gilet pillow there that it was a couple of quid, and it rolls up, as you can see in the video here. It rolls up quite small and goes into your pack, and then that's really comfortable then on the head. Not really bothered about the pillow, to be honest. I just got it because I thought it was cool. Yeah, so I would always recommend paying a bit more for your sleeping equipment. I'm probably going to invest in some more expensive stuff for that, so I'm going to get a more expensive air mat. I'm probably going to get a firmer rest, because obviously it's not great being cold overnight, so I'm going to invest in a better sleeping bag. Obviously this sleeping bag's quite big, as you can see here. It takes up half my pack when I pack it into the bag, so not the best. So I'm going to invest in a better sleeping bag, and I'm also going to invest in a better sleep pad, just to make sure I can keep warm, because I did wake up and it wasn't even that cold. It was like 5 degrees up there. Well, that's pretty cold, but I mean, you know, it could be colder. So if it was in 0 degrees conditions, then it would have been absolutely freezing cold, and I wouldn't have got a minute's sleep. So what I will do is probably invest in better sleeping gear next time. Okay, so let's move on to the cooking equipment that I took with me, because that's also another crucial factor when it comes to, you know, having a really solid and good wild camp. So again, I bought this from Amazon. So this is a cook pot. So it comes with a little mini pot with fold out handles, so you can use it as like a frying pan or like just a general cooking pan, and then it comes with a bigger one here. So this is a bigger cook pot. The cook set itself is really good. It's not flimsy, it's made of good stuff. The handles are a little bit flimsy, but it does you well. So it comes with those two, and it comes with this cup here. I linked everything in the video in the description, so you can purchase it yourself. It comes with a little knife and fork set that you can use, and I've just lashed a couple of lighters in the cup, and it all stores in that big pot there, in like quite a compact little situation. The stove I took with me on the last video was included in that set as well, but it is quite a small stove. The width of it is just not that good, so the pan does tend to slip off when you're using it. So if you're cooking anything in the big pot, it's quite tricky. So I'll just show you that. You can see there that the stove itself is quite narrow, so when it comes to putting on your cook pot, it is a little bit wobbly. So I have got a Vango stove, which I've linked in the description. So it's basically similar to the Pocket Rocket, and you can see there how much wider that stove is to the budget one that I got in Amazon. The reason I took the little one is because the size of the pot is tiny compared to the Vango one, which is quite big, but I'll probably not scrimp on that again. So, but the stove performed well. It was really good, using the C3000 performance gas that I got from Go Outdoors, and it performed really well. It cooked my meal, evening meal, really well, and obviously plenty of coffee as well, and it really handled it well. The gas was fine, the stove itself was fine, and I had no problems with it really. So, but the only thing is the cheaper stoves, they're quite narrow, so I'd probably avoid them and go for something like this Vango, which was relatively cheap. Really, it was not that expensive. Right, so in terms of the meals I was eating, so you know, you can take what you want really. You can take pot noodle, you can take noodles, you can take anything. You can take a full breakfast if you want. I just went for these things. So these are the Wayfarer Wild Camping Ready meals, so they're actually designed for camping. They come in a packet that you can either put in the stove and heat up in the packet, which I couldn't do because, as I mentioned earlier, my stove's too narrow to hold the pan, so when I put that in, it was falling off. And you can see that on my wild camping video from last week. Or you can pour the contents of it into the pan directly and heat it up that way, and that's what I did. And to be honest with you, it made an absolute mess. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't get my pan clean, so I had to use the little pan from then on. They were nice meals, and this is the all-day breakfast that I didn't cook because obviously I ruined my pan, but they're only a couple of quid, and they're quite tasty and different as well. It's a bit like microwave meals basically. So this one's an all-day breakfast, so I'm saving after my next camping trip. However, I probably would have been better off just taking a pot noodle or some noodles or something like that, just to have less mess really, because I mean, next time I go, I'll probably be able to cook this in my stove because I'll take my bigger stove and I'll just put that in the water and heat it up that way, and then it won't make any mess. It'll just be in the packet, and then you eat it and just throw the packet away. So they're quite nice. So if you are looking for a nice handy quick meal for wild camping, or even just camping in general, then I recommend them, because they're not that expensive and they're quite tasty for camping food anyway. So that's the cooking situation and the food. So I would recommend a good stove. Make sure it's wide enough to hold your pan, because it could be dangerous. You could set your tent on fire. And also just make sure that it all works and stuff before you go, because you don't want to arrive to cook a meal and your stove doesn't work or your gas has run out. Right, so I've come out of the tent now, so I'm looking at some of the little bits that I brought with me while I was on the camping trip. So I'm just sat in the gazebo in the garden while we go through those. First thing I'll say is this goes for anything like hiking, camping in the wild or anything like that, is a good survival bag. So I've got this just always in my hiking bag, and if things go wrong, the tent doesn't work, or I get caught in bad weather or hurt my ankle, you can get inside this. It's like a bag, and it'll keep you warm and dry while you wait for rescue or whatever it is you need. So I'd always recommend one of these, even if you're just going hiking for the day. Always have it in your bag. A good power bank. So this was around £30 on Amazon. It's 30,000 milliamp hours, so I get a good few charges out of this. It charges my phone and my camera equipment in order to keep them topped up overnight. So I do recommend one of these. They are quite heavy, but it's worthwhile taking, because you need to charge your phone, especially if you're using it for navigation, or you need it to reference your route or whatever. So definitely recommend one of them. I'll include that in the description. In terms of lighting, I probably took too much. I took a USB rechargeable head torch. This is very, very good, and it's only from Aldi, but it's a really, really good torch. So I'd recommend a good head torch, because you can properly see around your tent and outside the tent and inside the tent, and you can look for things and set and stuff like that. So I'd recommend one of them. But I also took this Euro Hike pencil light, which was quite useful to have just on, and then I took this pop-up lantern. These are all from Aldi. They're only quite cheap. But this lantern was nice. It had like a soft light to it, so I could hang it up on the tent. So, you know, I'd recommend maybe just taking the one light next time, because it was, you know, all three of them together are quite a lot of weight, and you've got spare batteries and stuff you need to think about too. Besides everything else, clothing wise, obviously I didn't take enough clothes last time I went, so I would recommend making sure you take a good long sleeve base layer, undergarments for your pants as well, waterproof pants, hiking pants that are comfortable and aren't going to catch on things, loads of layers, fleece, jackets, whatever you can take, all lightweight, and make sure you take a big coat, like a wintry coat or a down coat, and take a waterproof jacket as well, because things do get cold, especially when you're high up into the mountains. You need to make sure that you're wrapped up properly, especially when you're camping, because you're sitting still and that cold will hit you quickly. So I was wrapped up in, I had a t-shirt, a fleece, I had a winter coat and a waterproof coat over me, and I was still a bit chilly at times in the wind. So you do have to be careful, and you do have to make sure that you take enough clothing with you, especially if you're camping in the mountains. But I'd also recommend taking a spare set of clothes. So I put some running leggings and a running top in my bag, and a pair of socks just in case I got wet, so I could change and not be soaking wet in the tent, because that's the last thing you want to be doing in the mountains or camping or wild camping, is to be wet, because you'll never get dry and you'll never get warm. So make sure that you do think about your clothing. I took this as well. This is just a cheap dry bag from Aldi, so I put all my maps and my lighting and electronics in there, and that just ensured that if it did rain, things would stay dry. But you could use a carrier bag or whatever you liked, really. I had this little sit mat, which is from Go Outdoors. It was £3. It just folds up into a tiny little bit of foam. Very good for just sitting on grass, especially if it's wet. So I'd recommend something like that. And finally, my bag is the Nepal 65 bag, and that's included in the link in the description. It wasn't that expensive. It was about, I think it was about £50, something along them lines. Can't fully remember. It's a big pack. It's 65 litres, so it's quite a spacious one, but I did fill it because my sleeping bag takes up most of the pack, and I've got a big tent as well. So, but the only thing is, if you get any bigger than 65 litres, you're probably going to fill it, and you'll end up just carrying more weight. So I think that pack is big enough for me. I've got diabetes as well, so I have to take a lot of diabetic stuff, like my insulin pens and all that type of stuff. So I do need a bit of extra space than other people. Plus I'm taking camera gear with me in order to film these YouTube videos. So a 65 litre pack was just about enough for me. I don't want to go any more, because I will just fill it up, and if I go any less, I'll probably struggle to get stuff in. But when I do get lighter equipment, such as a smaller sleep mat and a smaller sleeping bag, I probably will possibly go for a smaller pack, because I'm not going to fill it as much then. Another mistake I made is I took water with me, so I took 2.5 litres of water and carried it up into the mountains. I camped at around 500-600 metres high, so it's not the highest, but I was walking from sea level, so I carried that water right from the car all the way up to the top where I was camping, and it was a little bit heavier than I wanted it to be, the pack. So, and I did walk past about 5 or 6 streams of water on the way up, so I could easily have just taken an empty bottle and just lashed a load of water in it, and that would have been fine. I wouldn't have had to carry it up all of the elevation that I did. So definitely recommend when you get a bit more experience, especially that was my first time on my own, so obviously I wanted to make sure that I had everything ready when I arrived at camp, so I didn't want to stress about finding water. But if you get a bit more experience, I do recommend just finding water when you're up there or camping near a known water source to ensure that you're not carrying too much weight. And that's it for this video. So hopefully you've got some nice little tips out of that for your first time as a wild camper, and especially as a budget wild camper. So all the stuff I've used is very much budget stuff. So some of it's from Aldi, some of it's from Go Outdoors, some of it's budget. But what I've learned is that you shouldn't budget on your sleeping bag or your sleeping mat or your tent. Now my tent was only about 60 quid, so I was, you know, although it is a budget tent, it's actually very, very good and there's nothing wrong with it. I don't know how it would fare in winter or in really, really strong storm conditions, but I imagine it'll be fine if you pitched it correctly. But the rest of my stuff, you know, like the stove and, you know, all the equipment like the lighting and the dry bag and everything else, it's all from Aldi and Go Outdoors, so it was all perfectly fine and it all worked. It's just a bit heavier than what you'd want it to be. So if you want to invest in more money into your wild camping, you're going to need to look at, you know, more expensive brands. But you don't need to. I didn't do it, and I had a perfectly good night, and nothing went wrong. So thanks for watching this week's video. Please subscribe to the channel so I get more views and more likes and more attention on my channel, and help me grow so I can do more and more videos like this. And I'll see you next week.